Hi everyone, very good afternoon. I hope you all had your lunch. So here we are with the Chennai chapter. We are heading towards the panel discussion, which is on Agile. Does Agile work in fixed price contracts? So just before I introduce the panelists, let me quickly thank our founding sponsor, Innovation Roots, which is a leading consulting and training service provider, helping organizations to achieve business agility and beyond. It is one of the leaders and pioneers of niche publishing services and well known for content collaboration with global thought leaders, authors, and creators. You may refer to www.innovationroots.com for more details. I would also like to thank our sponsor, Agile. Agile is a product offering from Tata Consultancy Services Limited. It is a purely cloud-based enterprise. It is a purely cloud-based enterprise agile planning tool along with DevOps capabilities. Enterprises can use Agile to adopt agile practices or scale across multiple Scrum and Kanban teams using enterprise scaling frameworks such as SAFe, Disciplined Agile, LESS, and more. You can try out Agile for up to 20 users for 30 days by signing up at agile.io, or you may reach out to us for any queries or exclusive product demos. Check out Agile page on Agile Network India website for more information. Quick do's and don'ts for all our participants. I would request you all to join 5 minutes before the start time. Use high quality speakers or headphones for better sound quality. And please keep your microphones muted and videos disabled, as this may cause disturbance and bandwidth issues. Questions will be taken via chat box at any point of time during the session. If you have any questions, I would request you all to drop your questions in the chat box. At the end of each session, the facilitator or moderator will help and read out few questions to the speaker as per the time availability. I highly recommend you all to fill in the feedback form after the event to help us understand more about the event management. We appreciate your cooperation, and with no further delay, let me call upon Manoj, who will be facilitating the session, and all the panelists on the webcam and microphone. Over to you, Manoj.
Thank you, Navina. Good afternoon, everyone. A warm welcome to today's panel discussion. Like Navina mentioned, the topic for today's panel discussion is, does Agile work in fixed price contracts? Now, before we start the discussion, let's have a round of introductions. I'll do a quick introduction about myself. My name is Manoj, and I'm a project manager at ThoughtWorks. As most of you, I started my career as a software engineer, and then over a period of time, I did my MBA, and then have been working as a project manager since then. On a personal front, I have a daughter who's 2 years old, and she really keeps me on my toes. I'll be the moderator for the discussion today, and for today's discussion, we have an energetic panel today: Mahesh, Uma, and Prabha. I'll request each of them to introduce themselves. Over to Mahesh first.
All right. I hope you all can hear me well. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mahesh Vardarajan. I work as a business agility coach with Accenture Solutions IQ. I've been into this role for over a decade now, having helped several of the Fortune 500 majors on their enterprise agile transformation journey. So I'm here to not only share my experiences and thoughts, having seen how agile works on a fixed price contract, but I'm also here to co-learn and network with each one of you today. Thanks to Innovation Roots and also the community Agile Network India for inviting me for this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Mahesh. Welcome to the panel. Over to you, Uma.
Okay. So this is Uma working in Toyota Connected India Private Limited as an Agile coach. I have overall 11 years of experience in IT and nearly 7 years in association with Agile. And yeah, so 7 years started my career as a developer, as Manoj said. So everybody starts their career as developer, and I moved to the position of BA and got the opportunity to work as a product manager in Ford, and switched as Scrum Master, now as Agile coach. So on a personal front, I'm a mother of 5-year-old, and I live in Chennai. So hoping for the wonderful session along with the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Uma. Over to you, Papa.
Thank you, Manoj. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is having great Sunday. About myself, my profession is process consulting since I started. Uh, I'm certified in Master Black Belt in Lean Six Sigma and Agile Coach. I led many transformation initiatives, either with respect to Six Sigma, digital, or Agile, from the scratch, which we call as a greenfield assignment. From thought leader standpoint, I authored 101 scientific paper, which has been published at various journals, conferences, and various media. In addition to this, I also authored 4 articles at leading magazine and 2 books. Recently, I authored a book chapter for the Sprinter for design thinking and agile. That's about myself. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Prabha. Welcome to the panel. Uh, let's start the discussion. Thank you, folks, for the introduction. So just a quick snapshot of how the next 40-45 minutes will look like. So we'll have 3 sections or broad areas of questions in the first 35 minutes. The remaining time we'll spend on taking questions from the audience and requesting the panelists for their views. Like Navina mentioned, audiences are encouraged to add their questions in the chat as we go ahead with the panel discussion. Now that we have spoken about this, before we start the topic, I want to give a brief intro into this topic itself. Most of you would be aware of this fixed price contract, also known as fixed bids. However, I do want to just set the context. So generally, we have at a very high level 2 types of contracts: fixed price and T&M. Obviously, there are different flavors in different organizations. In T&M, it's just straightforward. Like we have a set of people, and they are billed as per the time they spend in the project. While in fixed price, the amount is fixed, and it's not dependent on the number of people or the time they spend, but there's a goal that is set for the team to achieve. Now, this is just a quick brief so that we can go into our topic. Does Agile work in fixed price contracts? So let's start with it. As a first subsection, I would like to ask the panel, what are the challenges we encounter when running Agile in a fixed price contract? Let me start this discussion from Mahesh.
All right. So speaking about the challenges that we face when we do Agile in a fixed price engagement, uh, I would like to introduce or recap the audience about what we usually refer as the iron triangle constraints, right? Which is time, cost, and scope. Uh, in view of fixed price, most often than not, the time, also the money part, most of which is the schedule and the cost, that is what often gets locked or fixed. But we are not necessarily talking about the scope as well being fixed. Having said that, in some of the engagements that I have traversed in the last decade, uh, this is not quite well understood by the people who negotiate contracts, people who write requirements and stuff like that, right? Because when you fix all the 3, there is no flexibility there for agility to thrive in. So understanding the definition of how agile can thrive in a fixed price contract, that needs some awareness, which we have not uh, commonly seen at least few years back, while people are beginning to understand what nuances, right? The second thing, uh, when you have teams, agile teams which are new, probably they are going to have more challenges than people who are existing teams, who have been in one agile a flavor or so, because the dynamics of a new team versus an existing team, as we all understand, is distinctively apart, right? uh, I would like maybe stop with the third challenge, where if you have vague backlog items which are not well written, well defined, and if your commitment is going to be basis of either the features and user stories, as opposed to uh, what are the other ways to have a commitment while working in a fixed price, then we are going to set our own trap, right? So this goes back to my challenge number one. Do we understand how can this work, which probably the awareness and maturity uh, is less common, where we talk about legal team, sales and marketing team, uh, if you're having account management team, how they negotiate the scope and with your clients and stuff like that. I can go on and on, but in the interest of time and other panelists, I would now like to give the opportunity to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thanks, Mahesh, for that insight. Probably I'll ask Uma to go ahead next. Over to you, Uma.
Yeah, so well said, Mahesh. So, in continuation with Mahesh said, right? So, basically, from the starting of the project, so likely too much of time goes into the requirement gathering, because something in a fixed bid project, they will ask you, okay, tell me what is the timeline, what is the scope, what is the cost that you require, something like that. They may ask. So, the first challenge is the too much time goes into the requirement gathering and analysis, as team try to understand everything in the beginning itself, to provide the fair estimation. And the second one is team resists to accommodate any small change, or if or any changes that comes out of the request after you show the demo, right? And business will always push some small changes. No, you said you will be running projects in agile, so this should be okay for you. So that's why you are showing the demo, kind of. But again, team resists their change. It's like, no, this is a fixed big project, so we are already committed this much amount of work, so no, we can't accommodate. So these kind of negotiation takes long time during the execution of project also. So the mindset of the welcome changing requirement even late in development. So the that principle of agile becoming challenge when you used to run a project in fixed bid. Yeah, so I would like to hear from Prabha as well.
Cool. As I come from design thinking and Six Sigma background, so I start, my point with understanding, okay, with three different factors. First, mindset. There are two kinds of mindset, right? Fixed versus flexible. Where in Agile, right, we need to lean towards flexible. The second factor is about the cultural transformation. As we have been using various project management technique for a while, since we are in the world of Agile, what is our maturity in terms of Agile culture? Beyond these two factors, the very important thing is manifesto. What one of the manifesto is talking about is customer collaboration over the contract negotiation. Okay, there itself, right, we are losing the value of Agile in a typical project management. Okay, when we are in Agile, okay, where the fixed contract is not at all existed. Okay, now let's see another way, the different perspective. Okay, either waterfall or agile is not talking about anything about the contract, though it's part of in the estimation, but it's closely towards how we are approaching towards a delivery model. In waterfall, right, as everyone knows, it follows like SDLC life cycle, right, starting from requirement, then it goes to design, development, testing, then maintenance. Where in agile, right, It's basically, let me take like this. In waterfall, it's a linear approach, whereas in Agile, it's not linear. It doesn't connect anything about the building model at all. So our confusion is, we are interfacing Agile with the fixed contract. Okay, now the question starts. Don't we have this problem in typical traditional model? It still exists. Okay, it's not new when we are in Agile. The problem is already existing, but only the confusion is in the hybrid organization, we are connecting the Agile with the fixed contract. Fixed contract is not at all an encouraged one in the Agile transformation. What is most encouraged in Agile, if you ask? Frequent delivery, customer collaboration. That's all. Keep as simple as possible. So my point of view here is we are just confusing with the model instead of how value we can deliver very frequently to our customer at the initial stage onwards. But but we are confusing with the billing model. That's where today is our problem. In a nutshell, right? Agile is a boon. What are the challenges today we are facing in traditional waterfall? That's it. That's it, Manoj, from my side.
Thanks, Prabha. Thanks for those insights. It was very, we've spent across multiple areas. But what we'll do for the next section, right? We'll probably drill down into one specific area, which is scope creep. We also spoke about, each of you spoke about a bit of it. We'll go into much more detail. So the question here will be, when the price is fixed, how do you deal with scope creep? So for this question, let's start with Uma first. Go ahead, Uma.
Yeah, Manoj. So, important aspect of fixed bid project, right? So, how do we handle the scope change? So, that would be the question on many people mind while they start the fixed bid project in Agile. Yeah. So, one way of handling the scope change in this kind of project is a replacement technique, right? So, or we call exchange. So, so any feature, any new feature, or any change that is coming as part of new later into the project can be exchanged with any of the other feature which is like more or less same size or like lesser size. So the one way of handling is exchange, and priority is very important in this kind of project. So any project in Agile anyway they will do the prioritization and goes into the highest business value feature goes first. But in this kind of project it is very crucial that you start your project with high business value, because any changes that business is asking, that may be replaced with any of the less business value feature. And another important aspect is customer collaboration, as Prabha was mentioning for the last question, right? So the customer collaboration and complete transparency of the project is also very important. And any necessary changes asked by any of the business should bring into the project with complete awareness of all concerned stakeholders. So that's where the stakeholders know, okay, this is the change that we are introducing, and because of this change, this constraint could be affected, and so that they can keep some constraint flexible, right? So as Mahesh said, there is three constraints generally: the cost, time, and schedule. So if you bring that complete transparency within the project, the stakeholders may decide, okay, I can wait for one more month if you give this feature, or they will say, okay, no need, I'm happy with this feature, let's go and launch it, this can be do later, kind of thing. So the informed decision is very important. So long story short, right? Yeah, so that's it from my side, Manoj.
Thank you, Uma. Thanks for that insight. Definitely, I think this is like you rightly said, this is a topic that keeps recurring with everybody's mind. So I'll now shift to Prabha to allow him to share his thoughts on this particular question. Go ahead, Prabha.
Hmm. Cool. Well, it's really interesting insights from your side. Okay, especially I take the note of the transparency. Before I share my point, right, let me reiterate a few things about the transparency. For everyone, okay, transparency is nothing but is one of the pillar in pillar in our transformation. Okay, it basically sets the foundation. Okay, so we have to make sure the transformation travels throughout the journey, whether it is top to bottom or top to up. Okay. Okay. Now, to address the question right got raised by Manoj, assume that we are in agile transformation. Okay. Uh, we need to understand more about scope creep. What is scope creep? It's nothing but how requirement changes period of time. Now in agile, are we against the scope creep? If you ask me, no, because one of the manifesto talks about we need to welcome the changes at any point of time in a project. So the scope creep is always an increased factor in Agile, unlike a fixed contract concept in Agile. Okay. Now let's narrow down further. Let's take the base from the traditional model, especially the iron triangle. Okay, where we talk about scope, time, and cost by keeping the quality at the center. Do you think does it works in Agile? Definitely no, because in Agile, right, basically the scope is replaced with the sizing. Okay, uh, in my word, right, uh, basically from the background of Six Sigma, I would call the scope is actually out of scope in Agile world. That is, scope is not in the syllabus of Agile at all. We are confusing again here the scope versus sizing. Sizing is the most encouraged one to address or how to be deal this kind of nature uh, in agile journey. In the iron triangle, just we need to replace the scope with the sizing. As everyone knows about the sizing, right? It's basically a relative one. So in any journey, right, or we start agile journey from the hybrid or a traditional, or we start from the level 0, wherever we are, okay, until we become a pure agile organization. The first we have to remove the term called scope, just replace size. That would be the starting point to make a successful journey in the rest of the period. That's it, my side from Manoj.
Thank you, Prabha. Thanks. I think Prabha brought an interesting point. Rather than having scope as a part, start concentrating more on the sizing. Now I'll shift to Mahesh to let him share his thoughts on this question. Go ahead, Mahesh.
Thanks, Manoj. So, few things before we deal on solutions, to on dealing with scope creep. Uh, Let me remind all of us here on the overall goals that we are running behind. I would like to recall some of the agile foundational principles, like principle number 1. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer, right? So the biggest goal being none other than customer satisfaction. Then connected to that, you have principle number 2. You all and we all know that if we are going to be rigid and not going to deliver value for the customer, then the satisfaction will be an oxymoron. It never comes. So we have to be welcoming change even late in the development. And some of this to work in any relationship, we all know that trust is the basic working model. So we need to focus on building trust. And then the last principle number 12, at regular intervals you need to inspect and adapt in order to succeed, because we know that we may not know everything upfront. Likewise, when time and cost is fixed, I need to adapt frequently. So how do we achieve that? So aligned to some of these principles, here are some solutions that I summarized. My sincere apologies if they have already been repeated by my colleagues. So the first solution that we all have been saying is fix the size, not the scope, right? Uh, Meaning that if this is what that initial product backlog that you have envisioned, if this is the amount of work you have on the plate, get an initial estimation done, and maybe say, okay, in this much money and in this much time, maybe this is the work that it looks like, right, from a sizing perspective. And then when a change comes, we need to have a approach to deal with change where you swap X with Y when something going to change as it's under the execution, and create a definition of done which becomes not only a quality gate, but it also builds in a shared understanding, right? Within the time, are we going to be doing in sprint functional testing? Are we going to be doing UAT? Are we going to deploy to production? What's the level of automation that will happen, and how often the customer will get a release, and maybe get that specification and estimation to be more emergent in nature with the real teams, because often teams will be involved late. So when you have a ballpark estimation with representatives of the people, but as you begin, you need to get the real agile teams who will do the work, get an initial round of estimation, and then see how it looks like. Most often than not, when you involve the teams, we have often noticed whatever velocity that people had thought the teams would end up delivering vis-a-vis what actually the team seems to be when they begin could be distinctively apart. And this is where, to me, the inspect and adapt comes in, right? So your progress is not based on story points, based on velocity. Those are a means to an end. So what is the end then? In order to deal with scope creep, I think we just can't rely on story points or the size. Those are the ways and the means. The end goal, in order to achieve customer satisfaction, we need to commit a set of business objectives. Some organizations do that in the form of OKRs, objectives and key results. Some of you may use the term KPIs, key performance indicator. Whatever way you are habituated to, define the business goal, and then when the scope changes, seek alignment to the goal, and then we will figure out what is a must have or a nice to have with the established prioritization techniques, right? Those are some ideas that I have learned from my experience. Manoj, over to you.
Thanks, Mahesh. Thanks for that insight. And in fact, the building of trust definitely plays a very crucial role. And like you rightly said, bringing the business value to forefront. So let's move to the final subsection in today's discussion, which is going to be probably the little bit heavier question. What are the lessons learned, from running a fixed price contract in an agile model? So for this, let me start with Prabha. Over to you, Prabha, for your thoughts.
Okay, so thank you, Manoj. Okay, let's assume that, or it is general, right? In any organization, there are three types. One is traditional, second is agile, and third is hybrid. Okay, they are neither traditional alone or agile alone. It's a mix of both. Okay, now the problem exists, right? Only at the hybrid organization, right? Who doesn't follow this completely or that completely. Okay, let me take a few statistics behind before I pursue next, because hybrid organization is the only one who is facing a lot of challenges, problem. Okay, we have to focus. This is most interesting area would be uh, from statistics standpoint. Okay, 2/3 of the organizations are moving towards agile or leaning towards agile. Okay, the companies who are following more than 4 years in agile, if you take right, only 14%. Okay, in a nutshell, right, 50% of the organization whatever exists today is a hybrid organization. Okay, now within the hybrid organizations there are a lot of initiatives, right? uh, they may follow irrespective of the project management methodologies. Now let's take within an enterprise. 51% of the project executions are happening through the agile, where in the previous year it was roughly 41%. Okay, then this hybrid, the traditional methodology we follow around 36%. The rest 13 or 14% we follow that hawk. Okay, now very interesting point. Within this delivery model, most of them prefer to work in the hybrid way, uh, and Scrum follows roughly like 18%. Kanban follows roughly talk about 14%. The rest is about the lean and other methodologies. This is a nutshell about what is happening throughout the organization, throughout the enterprise level, or different ways of methodology. If you see, right, the most problem goes to the who follows this hybrid. Let me take one of the case. Okay. Now, from the project execution standpoint, when we are in agile way of working, okay, if you see, right, in hybrid organization, the bottom layer follows completely the agile way of working, where the top layer thinks everything in terms of about the traditional way of working, right? So the top players always interested to understand when the project could be delivered, right, in terms of the final deadline. But who are at the bottom layer, right, or in the foundation of the transformation, they will estimate in terms of sprint. Now the question starts at the delivery level or at the middle level, how I should quote, how I should report to the, or how I can communicate from the bottom to top or top to bottom. Okay. Now this is where, in Agile or in Scrum, we miss the practice. What I mean the practice is, this journey is unlike like PMP what we have been done. In Agile, right, it's not, or in Scrum, it's not only who can directly come through learning of Scrum and Agile into the practitioner here. The very important point is here, whoever been in the part of Agile or Scrum, they need a good amount of enough experience in the traditional way of working too. Okay, then only we can tackle this kind of exposure. It means whoever showing leading the picture here should have the knowledge of both agile and the traditional way of working. Okay, especially in the context of a hybrid. Now in this case, right, what we have to do is like what we do in our PMP, right, or in a typical traditional delivery. Just have a ballpark the complete requirement stuff, do the estimate technique, come up with the deadline like 8 months from now. Now, based on our historical velocity, okay, then we need to split into various sprint and say, hey guys, at the bottom layer to report to our team, here to complete this project, this number of sprint is required. To the upper layer, just mention the final date. I had this kind of an experiment from the scratch, okay, when we try to convert a service-based company to the technology-based company in terms of digital age. We did this magic. Fortunately, it was worked good. Okay, having a skill set of both typical traditional waterfall uh, approach and agile approach. Okay, so this is what the starting point. That's it, Manoj, from my side. Let me hand over to others.
Thanks, Prabha. Thanks for the thought. Over to Mahesh to add some more thoughts from his side on this.
Okay, so from a lessons learned perspective, uh, I think the first thing is to set that expectations clearly amongst all the stakeholders concerned, beginning from the customer, right? Some of us may have worked in a multi-vendor scenario where one organization will develop the system, another organization will test the system. And we had in one of the stories where the customer said, you know what, you guys are going to hold each other accountable, because if you break the system, that person will find it out, right? And when you are talking about scenarios like that, it's even more challenging. It's agile in fixed price plus multi-vendor, and you actually do part of the work, not the entire work. So multiple things are involved. uh, Preferably, organizations should push for, uh, this has been seen in, especially thanks to the pandemic, some organizations, are especially the captives, IT captives, have been beginning to do what we call vendor consolidation exercises, where one agile team goes to one vendor completely, right? If that means you have the scrum master from your own organization, yes it is, yes it is. and whether it is development, testing, all roles concerned, the end-to-end ownership goes to one particular vendor and an organization, which gives you that sense of ownership and accountability. And in reciprocation, you are expected to set the right level of expectation with the customer. Remember the previous topic we said, know the business goals, the KPIs or OKRs we are committed to achieve. That's the bigger goal. Everything else is only the ways and the means, right? The second thing is in the way we write contracts. In one of my early start several years ago, I saw a SOW where iteration by iteration or sprint by sprint, what stories will be delivered were part of the commitments, right? And if this is how the upstream stakeholders write the contracts, and you move on to agile in execution, there is very little to no flexibility in blaming the team how to deal with everything that's already committed upfront. Legally you have issues to deal with it, right? Therefore, one of the ways to mitigate this, I have seen where people go for two levels of contract. One for the discovery phase of the work, when you only build, to understand the need requirements and build a critical case, come back and validate. And then based upon that, you come back to the customer and say, I need so much time, so many people, or here is the money I need to get this objectives met. So setting that realistic expectation, and then as we already spoke, having the real team involved way ahead of time is much important than only the representative of the team, because most of us would have experienced that if the team that estimates the work is not the team that does the work, you are likely to see different estimates and different velocity data over time. So co-create the value together with the customer, focus on the way you write the contract, the way the work is outsourced. And if people were to understand that, oh, it has to be fixed right up front, I call it a fallacy or an oxymoron. Everything cannot be fixed up front. That's the first level setting exercise we need to do up front. Over to you, Manoj.
Thanks so much, Mahesh. Let me quickly move to Uma. Over to you, Uma.
Thank you. Yeah, so both Prabha and Mahesh has covered the planning and estimation completely. What are all the best way of doing the planning and estimation in fixed bid projects of Agile, right? So I just want to touch something upon the execution, right? So the one of the question here in chat box I have read, how do you ensure whether that is the change or not? Right, so because everything is not known in the initial stage itself, that is again one of the philosophy of agile. So that is the core challenge when you execute agile in fixed project, right? So many of the business team will not agree this as a change. They will say this is what I have asked. So for that issue, right, so the lessons learned was, so always you should have the refinement session, continuous refinement session, continuous collaboration is required with your business partner. So when before you start your sprint, again have a refinement session directly with your business customer, and this is what that we are going to develop in next 2 weeks, and this is what you are going to get it in the next 2 weeks in demo. Setting the right expectation will clear 99 percentage of the problem that comes after showing the demo. They will say, no, this is what I asked. So again, I'm reiterating the customer collaboration is key, and the continuous collaboration. It's not only like starting, right? So anyway, you will do the initial phase and spend much time on requirement gathering in this kind of project. Even though during the execution also, it is very important. You have to closely collaborate and refine your requirement continuously with your customer before even you start the development. It is not just we are showing the demo and getting the feedback. That is one thing. And of course, transparency is key actually. So another comment in chat box is like, is the contract is the replacement of trust? Of course, right? So your business partner is not having trust on you, so they have to make sure they establish the contract and everything is there in contract, including scope, timeline, milestone, and they will, so that they can follow the contract and ask you the question, right? So throughout the execution, you have to bring the transparency, gain the trust of your business customer, so that they believe in you. So okay, they are showing everything, this is how the project, they are showing the true progress, so that they make the right decision. So that the both of the things are very important. Yeah, so over to you, Manoj.
Thanks, Uma. I think we're almost on time. I know it's been a very tight packed conversation with a lot of insights and experiences that has been shared. Uh, thank you, panelists, for sharing this. I'll quickly switch to the questions because can see a bunch of questions that are popping up, and I think people are adding as we speak as well. And thanks, Uma, for taking the initiative to tie up the answers to the questions in the discussion itself. So let me start from the top. The point here, so the first question I'm reading out, the point here is whether the change is enhancement in current epic or story. How do we identify whether it is in scope or out of scope? As in the initial phase requirement, it's not clearly defined. Who wants to take this?
I can pick it up.
Go ahead, Mahesh.
Okay. So this is connected to one of the key points we already shared in our discussion, right? Where you're no longer committing to a given scope only. You're rather committing to a set of business objectives, right? And we need to be clear with what are we fixing. We are not fixing time, cost, and scope. You fix two, but not all the three. Then number two is Scrum. I think Scrum gives a wonderful way to deal with this problem at hand, because in every sprint, our commitment is a basis of sprint goal, not a sprint backlog. So this is the same message we advocate to the teams. How do you welcome changing requirements? Whenever a change comes, you seek alignment to, is this still aligned with the sprint goal? Only then the team even considers that change. So likewise, when you have an aggregate of so many sprints, look for alignment to the larger goals that you have committed for, and ask the customer, hey, this change that is coming, is this aligned to the larger goal that we are committed for? For example, in a telecom company, if you want to roll out 5G initiative, and if there are some minimum things that needs to be met, any change that comes in, you will seek validation. Is it part of 5G rollout wave 1 or phase 1? If this is the minimum viable stuff, then let's consider that. Everything else takes a back seat. That is one of the classical ways to deal with the scope change. Over to you, Manoj.
Thanks, Mahesh.
Manoj, I can
For
add few cents, Manoj.
go ahead, Prabha.
Okay. As I mentioned in part of our discussion, right, the scope is actually out of scope in my syllabus, in our Agile syllabus. But doesn't mean that we need to restrict to answer this question. Let me take differently. Whether it is in scope or out of scope, right? That's what Ajay mentioned. Now, if something adds value to the product increment or program increment, just go ahead. That's it. Don't see whether it is given in the initial part or later, because in Agile, right, value is most important. Okay. If you see the value in the enhancement, don't see what written in the document, just go ahead. That's what the Scrum also expecting at the end, right? What is the value we are adding at the end of the sprint in terms of product increment or program increment, in short called PI. So that's what I need to add, Manoj.
Thanks, Prabha. What is the project? So the next question is, what is the project didn't meet with end date? So I think maybe I'll expand to that question. Maybe the original scope, right? When we compare to that, maybe it does not meeting to the end date. So what will we do at that point? I know this is a very tough question, and I think we'll in different projects we might get this scenario. But let me pass on the question to the panelists. Who
So
wants to take
it's
this?
about
Go ahead,
what
Uma.
if the project didn't meet the end date, is it?
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
what, while we discussing, we were saying, right? So the complete transparency, it is not like all of a sudden you are going to say, we are in red, we are not going to meet the milestone. So when you showcase the progress throughout your execution, your customer will know, okay, this is going to take one more month, and this is what the feature that we are going to complete, and this is what the feature that we are not going to complete, right? So anyway, always accepting this kind of deviation is not easy, I agree. That need lot of coaching between both of the parties, the business customers as well as the development team. But when you do this project execution in a transparency manner, your customer will have one constraint as a flexible constraint. They can keep some point of time. I mean, time can be the flexible, cost can be the flexible, or like your scope could be the flexible. So this is not something new in your agile, right? So it is, the flexible constraints was there in waterfall also, and the same method can be used here as well. So you can show the true progress and have the customer tuned to that mindset of having some constraint as flexible. I think that will work.
I can add to that, Manoj. So I would again tie this back to, okay, the time is gone, time has elapsed. What about the goal? Did we meet the goal, or is the goal not met? Because that is the basis with which the whole trust ecosystem works, right? If we have to succeed, the customer has to succeed as well. For example, if Amazon.com has to do a great Indian day sale, or a Flipkart has to do a big billion day sale, and for that some things have to go. If the customer is successful, so is the vendor, right? So you seek alignment on, did we meet there? And I think Uma already covered on periodic tracking, and transparency with the customer will probably not make it a last minute surprise, because when the time is elapsed, customer is likely to know what can come through or not come through. So I have rarely seen that, things like, okay, we have, time has elapsed and we are not done, provided we stick to the scope model, right? Um, and in one of the cases, we also saw this advantage of Agile, because in Agile, anyway, your time is fixed when you do sprints. It's 2 weeks is 2 weeks. Money for that, if you do cost per sprint, team is also fixed. So most often than not, people say, oh, this is very natural, because for that particular sprint, time and cost is anyway fixed, right? So then what happens in this case? People, in one of our customers, we saw that a roadmap which was supposed to take a multi-year, 2 year long, the team spent 6 months. The wave one of the transformation got done, the product was developed, and we were 1 month left for the end of the year. The customer saw that the wave one needs have been met with already 1 month left, and with the remaining functionality, customer saw, I don't need it anymore, given the working software, I see it, because you have already given to me. Then the next question was, what do we do with the team? Money is still there, the team is still there, time is still there. You know what the customer did in that case? The customer said, okay, let's pull the next year requirements ahead of time and get the money invested on that. Let's not do something for the sake of doing. Let's invest money on doing the right things for the business. So while we are also speaking on the opposite side of time is left and work is not done, this is the other boon of sticking to the time with the stable team, and where what can you do when your work is ahead of time as well. I have seen both the flavors. Over to you.
Thanks, Mahesh. I think we have one more last question. Probably we'll take this as the last question. So the question is, kindly explain managed investment. Shri Ganesh, if you could add some more details on that, it will help.
With some details, please. What do you mean by managed investments? How do we work on intentional architecture, emergent design with the new unknown things, something like that, please?
Okay, it's like an ambiguous requirement situation,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I think so. The question is like, how do you deal with ambiguous requirement, right? It's a new age technology, cutting edge. So how do you run a fixed price contract in agile fashion in this scenario?
Yes.
Manoj, since we are out of time, right? Let me give a small solution so that Sri Ganesh can reach us at any point, okay, through the network. Uh, this is the where we have to use a concept called lean portfolio management, okay, which is at the top layer in the scaled framework. So by understanding time, I'm going to stop with this solution. But if we go in depth about lean portfolio management, definitely to address the questions to what Striganis is expecting. It will definitely address.
Thanks, Prabha. Thanks for adding that. In the interest of time, we'll close the panel discussion. Bring a conclusion to this, and then obviously, like what Prabha mentioned, we can do some offline research on that as well. So thank you, panel. First, it was very engaging discussions and definitely a lot of insights in the questions that was asked. Thank you, Mahesh, Uma, and Prabha. Thank you for taking time today and sharing your experiences and thoughts as well. Thank you, everyone.